So now we're going to talk more about these mid-ocean ridges. And you can write up at the top, they have rift valleys. This is really important to make sure that you know mid-ocean ridges, these underwater volcanic mountains, have a valley in them called rift valleys. And if you recall yesterday, I talked about how, when you hear the word rift, if there's a rift between friends, then they're moving apart from each other. They're not as close. And so mid-ocean ridges, there's rifts, and remember that's where seafloor spreading happens. Spreading, rift, go apart. So on here, we have the definition of a mid-ocean ridge. It is an underwater volcanic mountain, underwater volcano, where new ocean floor is created. And now's a good time to take a second and introduce a word to you called divergent boundary. We're going to eventually learn that there's 3 different types of boundaries, and divergent is one. And when you hear the word diverge, at first you may not know what it means, but if I had 2 people standing in front of me and I said, I want you to diverge, intuitively you know that you should be moving apart. So a divergent boundary is where you have a boundary, you have a place where 2 things meet and they're moving apart. And that is a place where seafloor spreading happens, where new ocean floor is created. Mid-ocean ridges curve like the seam of a baseball along the ocean floor, and they are present in all of the Earth's ocean. And so if we look at this picture over here, you can see that these little white arrows are pointing to mid-ocean ridges. And so here, this mid-ocean ridge is called the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, and it is in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And it's just amazing to think that this is an underwater volcano, and if you were on a boat going across from North America over here to Europe, you would have no idea that you are sailing over this volcano underneath you. It's all underneath the water. Now, there are some places where the mid-ocean ridge is not underwater, and they're viewable from the surface of the Earth. Now, this is not the norm. You can see most mid-ocean ridges lie underwater, but there are a few places where the ridges poke above the surface. And if we take a minute and look at this picture here to the left, we can copy the rest of that down in a minute. This is Iceland. And Iceland is currently getting ripped apart by a rift valley. Seafloor spreading is happening here. And you can see in this picture, there's a person, there's their cars. I don't know how deep these rift valleys, these cracks go. But eventually, if we come back in a million years, this will end up being an ocean in between them. And I can't help to go back and think in the past about how this over here could represent South America. And this on the right could represent Africa, back in Pangea days when they were connected. And then, for whatever reason, a convection current, if I could picture a convection current going on inside of the mantle here, occurred and began to separate the two. And eventually, as that rift grew and grew and grew, water filled in this gap, and this water would become eventually what we know as the Atlantic Ocean. Oops, spelled that wrong. And the Atlantic Ocean is continuing to grow. South America and Africa are still spreading apart. Seafloor spreading is still occurring there. But of course, in this picture, this is not South America and Africa. This is Iceland. And Iceland will eventually be split in half. Those mid-ocean ridges that we found underneath all those oceans were found using sonar, and we talked about sonar yesterday. And all mid-ocean ridges, just to reiterate, have a crack running through their center called a rift valley. And again, we're really wanting to remember that a rift valley goes with mid-ocean ridges and seafloor spreading. Now I want you to go ahead and take a second and flip in your textbook, or not in your textbook, in your notes, to towards the back. You have this diagram. And we've talked about enough things on this diagram that we can fill out the left portion of it. And so you can see you have a word bank down at the bottom. But we're going to start here with, we have a box pointing to this mountain. And this represents the mid-ocean ridges. So you can write that down. And what comes out of a mid-ocean ridge? If I come down to this box, I will write down that molten material comes out of the mid-ocean ridge. And where does all of this happen at? Okay, here I can see that this is moving apart. Where do mid-ocean ridges, where are they found? They're found on the ocean floor. So I can label this side ocean floor, and I can label this side ocean floor. And then here, I can label this, just from the side, we would call this crust, oceanic crust or ocean crust, either one's fine. And up at the top, you see we have this bracket that covers all the sea floor, and that represents the process that's happening there. That's called seafloor spreading. And I think there's one more thing that we can fill in down here, and that would be this box to the right of molten material. Where does molten material come from? It comes from the mantle layer of the earth. These other boxes on the right, we will fill in as we go over the next part. We'll leave those blank for now.